Morning, everybody.
Good morning.
It's nice to see you all. Well, I'm sure you're all thrilled that we're going to start out the day with physiology and pharmacology.
Sure. You betcha.
Yeah, I remember, when I managed to get through college without taking any math classes, and I convinced them I only needed one science. And when I transferred, they said I had to do another science, and I figured out a way to make the same science take it a second time. I am not a science person, and Carol is, so you got the range here. And but one thing I can tell you is if you take notes when you're getting a complex topic like physiology and pharmacology, this is how I managed to pass when I went on to be an alcohol drug counselor, because you had to pass that. At that point, there was no getting out of it. But the professor told me, just write everything I say, and then when you go home, rewrite it a second time. It creates a neural pathway, and it makes it easier for you to learn. So, of course, being a child of alcoholic parents, I wrote it about 10 times. But I now know it. So I have the version that is how I managed to put it into my head so it would stay there. So hopefully it'll work for you. So the first thing I want to tell you is I don't want to talk about physiology and pharmacology when I'm talking to a class of advocates, because they'll check out and flip out. So it's better to just sort of be talking it through and then go back to the points as you go forward. So Jack, is it all right if I pick on you today a little bit? All right, no dancing.
No, you said you wouldn't.
I'm inconsistent. That was yesterday. Do you want me to stay back then? Is it okay? Well, the reason he says that is Jack and I used to have a dating relationship. Jack don't know it, but we went to high school together. And
Seriously?
Yeah, didn't you know that? Jack and I went to high school together. Back in that day, 18 was the drinking age, and when we graduated, we went out for a few drinks. And I'll tell you something about Jack. He has one drink, and he relaxes. He has two drinks, and he starts talking, and you cannot shut him up. And then on the third drink, we have to cut him down from the chandelier. That's how he's been. He's like that in high school. And me, I have to tell you, I'm Irish. I have one drink, I feel absolutely nothing. In fact, I don't feel relaxed like Jack does on one till I have 6. Okay? And then when I start, well, with me it's not talking, it's like dancing and singing and everything and carrying on. Well, when I get to that point, I don't need 6, I need 10, 12 drinks. And when you're cutting me down from the chandelier, maybe we're talking a case. Okay? That's how I am. And Jack still put up with me, although I'm an expensive date. And we hang out together, and at our 5-year reunion we get together. And I got to tell you about Jack. He has one drink, and he's relaxed. He has 2 drinks. I can't shut him up. He has 3 drinks, and we're prying him off the chandelier. Now, I'm expecting to have like a big, like almost a case of beer and carry on. But for some particular reason, this day I only had 6, and I was flat on my keister. But I know it was Kathleen's fault, because she's a very good cook, but she makes these vegetarian dishes, no potatoes or nothing, and I had nothing to soak up the booze. So normally I could drink the case, but thank you, Kathleen. And Jack, the next time we go out, I'm back on a case, and then we go out again, and this time I'm on my butt with only 4 drinks, but I know now that it's your fault, because you served the 2 of us white wine, and I do much better with red. You see, I'm looking for something outside of me to explain that unpredictability of what's going on. But what you see is a change in how I process the alcohol. Jack is exactly the same. At the 10-year mark, Jack and he's still putting up with me. At the 10-year mark, Jack has 1 drink, he relaxes. He has 2, can't shut him up. 3, we're prying him off the ceiling. I have 1 drink, and I'm completely blotto. Okay? Because that's the process of alcoholism. is a change in tolerance. What I'm describing is tolerance. Take a look up here. Tolerance. And for a diagnostic indicator, now we're not alcohol drug counselors and you don't have to think, oh, identify someone as having a drinking problem or not. Leave that to the individual and the professional. But being able to hold your liquor and take a lot on board does not mean you can hold your liquor and you're in good shape. It means you're in trouble. A high tolerance on the front end is a diagnostic indicator of early stage alcoholism. Okay? What they mean by loss of control, if you watch the movies or you talk to people, general people that aren't knowledgeable about alcohol and drugs, for people that are not knowledgeable about alcohol and drugs, they think loss of control means you just start drinking, you don't stop, and you run around, or you take the drugs and you don't stop, and you just carry on, and you're out of control and you won't stop drinking. That's not what loss of control is. Loss of control means I can no longer predict what will happen when I put a substance into my body, whether it's alcohol or other drugs. And I always start with alcohol because it's, after nicotine, it's the most lethal, the most likely to kill you, and it does the most organic damage of all the other drugs combined, with the exception of nicotine. And most of the people we work with will be using alcohol. And mind you, if someone's in the early stage where I was like at 18 with Jack, if you're in the early stage, you can stop and start without any trouble. You can go months without using. But the indicator that there's a problem is the high tolerance. Okay? And then at the 5-year mark, you see this unpredictability. Okay? And I'm going to explain why that happens in a minute. And at the tail end of drinking use, you have completed so much physiological damage that instead of your liver processing the alcohol, and I'll talk more about this, instead of the liver processing it, ancillary systems are kicking in to create enzymes. And remember, women have less access to those enzymes than men. So what happens is less and less alcohol affects you. So we get the notion, they tell you, there's a saying, it says, 1 drink is too much, 1,000 is not enough. That identifies early stage and middle stage alcohol or drug use. When you get to late stage, 1 drink. I mean, when I worked in the shelter, we had a woman who told me, it was actually probably the first month I was working there, and I was kind of sensitive because they didn't really want to hire me because I was an alcohol drug counselor, and they were afraid I was going to be confrontational and directive and difficult, and they said, well, we'll put you on the night shift, you'll do less damage. And they said, we don't want you pointing out everyone and identifying everyone, because people don't like being around alcohol and drug counselors. They think we're like taking their inventory and counting their drinks, which we're not, but the fact remains is they put me on the night shift, and that is the truth. They did put me on the night shift and left me there for 12 years. But they were saying, no, don't be identified. Everyone you see is an alcohol, you know, they had that notion. But the first month I was there, one of the women said to me, she said, I'm a late stage alcoholic and I feel a lot of stress. I feel a lot of stress. And I said, well, what can we do? What have you done in the past that works? What's helped you? And, you know, helped her find a meeting and things like that. Things were good when I left. I just wrote a note in the manual, late stage, and guess what? Nobody knew what it meant, technically. Because a lot of times we make rules in our shelters that are based on drinking and drug use without understanding the difference between early, middle, and late, or understanding the difference between using a substance, misusing a substance, and actually being addicted to it. They are 6 different things. And one rule does not cover all of it. Okay? So she said that she was late stage, and I wrote a note in the log about it and said offer her support. Debrief with the day crew, went home, and when she came upstairs after I left, she said she had a cough and asked for NyQuil. How many of you know NyQuil is what, 40 proof? Yeah, and she was late stage. She drank about half a bottle of NyQuil, and our executive director had been on a diet, and she had wore brand new shorts with flamingos on them to work that day. And the first thing that happened when the woman drank the NyQuil was she came up and told the ED, who had just lost like 40 pounds and he got a chip from AA, or not AA, Weight Watchers or whatever. She said, "Well, you look fat." And so she was really upset. And then she went into the program manager's office and stole her purse. So things did not look good because late stage, fast, the drink affects fast and you have a harder time functioning. And so they tried to, talk to her, but one of the side effects of alcohol is it can make you feel hostile toward others, and she got hostile. They decided to call the community service officer. When the CSO showed up, things escalated, and she wound up getting arrested. So it was horrible and ugly, but it was a training issue, because had the shelter been aware that NyQuil would not have been an option. So one of the things that I talk to advocates about and how to make your shelter accessible and safe and still treat women with dignity and make sure they have access to what they need is don't have mouthwash with alcohol in it. It's a trigger for people with late stage. Don't have cough medicine with alcohol in it. It's a simple, that way if someone wants their cough medicine or they want their, you're not making it hard for them. They have access to it, but you're removing something that could cause substantial risk and harm to people who are already stressed out. Because with alcoholism and other drug addiction, stress equals craving, and craving is followed by use unless there's support. And in many confidential shelter settings, we don't have the dollars or the money to have an alcohol drug counselor on staff. We often don't have people that are really knowledgeable about alcohol in depth, but you can reduce probably half of your problems by making that simple change in what you have in your program, just to make it more accessible. Okay? Now, I won't stay on that story. I'm going to move forward because that's the difference between early, middle, and late. And this is what tolerance is. Tolerance is physiological. Tolerance is also brain. And I'll talk about that momentarily. But I want to talk to you about, so the first thing we see in a physiological sense with alcoholism or other drug addiction is high tolerance. You can take a lot on board. Then you see a shift and you can't predict what you're going to do. Then what happens is you get toward the tail end is just a little bit, can take you to places you don't want to go, okay, because of the damage. The next thing that happens is continued use in spite of adverse consequences. That means you keep on doing it. And there are two reasons you keep on doing it. The first is because the brain is affected. You don't necessarily recognize how overly involved you are in a relationship with substances. The second thing that happens, and again, I'm talking about alcohol because it is the easiest one to demonstrate, and it is the hardest. And most people who use alcohol have the greatest damage. When you use other drugs, they still work on the liver pathway and the neural pathways and things, but alcohol is the worst, which is why we're talking about it. Most everything I'm telling you other than the enzyme stuff relates to both alcohol and other drugs. So why people continue to use in spite of negative consequences is, first of all, they're not getting an accurate perception of what's happening, and second of all is because of their liver. And I want to talk to you about this. Now, first thing that happens, she's been trying to do an intervention all week. I've been sitting here with vodka. In case you're wondering. If I've been drinking, the first thing that happens, whether you're male or female, you put alcohol into the body, it goes down the esophagus, it gets to the stomach, okay? Now, I told you yesterday, when men are drinking, they have an enzyme, alcohol dehydrogenase, that begins to process that. Women don't have that to the same degree. So what happens for both men and women is when it goes down the esophagus and gets to the stomach, it's not digested. It's absorbed. How many of you ever had a drink on an empty stomach? Yeah, it's like it kicks you in the back of the head. It's because it's not digested. It's just absorbed. If there's food in, it slows the absorption, but all alcohol is absorbed. None of it isn't. And when it is absorbed, every cell, or the alcohol gets into every cell in the body, okay? So when it goes in, it goes through the esophagus to the stomach and then to the liver. And when it gets to the liver, you want to think of the liver like a toxic waste dumping ground. I call it like Hanford, like, you know, a nuclear waste plant. Because it processes all chemicals, your aspirin, your coffee, pollution, but no matter what chemical you put into your liver, it always processes alcohol first because it's so toxic. It's one of the most toxic things you can put into your body. I always laugh when vegetarians are drinking wine for health reasons. Like, don't mind, because it is like really toxic. And I've ruined it for you now, right? So this is why no one wants to go out with me. I swear to God. Okay, so you put the alcohol in. It goes down the esophagus to the stomach to the liver, and then the liver begins to process it. And the first thing it does is converts alcohol to acetaldehyde. And acetaldehyde is a toxic chemical. In fact, it'll take paint off your car. Now, and now here's the difference between Jack and me. When Jack drinks alcohol, he gets a conversion. It converts to acetaldehyde. And then it goes from acetaldehyde to carbon dioxide, water, acetic acid, and it's eliminated from the body at a set pace. Okay, now me, we're just pretending here. For me or for anyone who presents with alcoholism, when you put that alcohol into that liver and it converts to acetaldehyde, if you have that, there's a biological difference that the acetaldehyde builds up at 2.5 times the rate. So there's a physiological difference in processing. Okay, a physiological difference in processing. And what that means is for the person who gets carries the acetaldehyde at 2.5 times the rate, in the early stages of drinking, they appear to function better. That's the person who they can hold their liquor, they walk, talk. When they get pulled over, if they do get pulled over, they blow high, and no one can figure out why they're functioning so well, because they're at an early stage of addiction. It's high, 2.5 times the rate it takes. So, and you want to think about alcohol like, now I'm going to pick on Ray. He's in my line of vision. Equal opportunity. If I stuck you with a pin, Ray, how would that feel? It hurt. It hurt. Okay, I'm going to put alcohol on it. How does that feel? Burn. It burns. Now, if you hold that alcohol, that burning is an initial stimulatory response. That's what you get, okay? But if you hold the cloth on it with the alcohol, it goes numb, right? First it burns and then you go numb. People with early stage addiction have a higher stimulatory response that lasts longer. Okay, so that is why they're functioning, carrying on, and doing just fine. To get to that numb part takes a little longer. Okay, now so what you have happening in early stage, you have high rates acetaldehyde. The person's walking and talking, and liver cells are getting damaged and getting destroyed. Okay, and once they're destroyed, they're finished. How many of you have ever eaten a pickle? Can we turn it back to a cucumber? No. Okay, so in essence, you're pickling. That's why they say pickled. You're pickling your liver. That's a layman term for you. So you put the alcohol in, so it begins to do the damage, but you're high functioning because your liver is a great organ, and other cells will pick up other pathways. But over time, more and more damage occurs. And as the damage occurs, that's why you can't predict what will happen, because it's unpredictable which cells in the liver are functioning at that moment. They come and go, and so you're up and down there in that middle stage period where it becomes unpredictable. You get to late stage, you have a lot of damage to the liver. It no longer can handle the alcohol load, and so what it does is it kicks in these side things to help process it, to keep body and soul together. But ultimately, you're done. Now you can stop using. You can stop using at any point, early, middle, or late, if you have addiction going on. But the liver does not go back to the way it was prior to use. That's why they call having this illness recovery, like asthma or diabetes or other chronic illnesses, because the liver functioning is compromised, and it's a permanent thing. If you choose not to put substance in, you won't continue to have problems. But even without booze, if you went back to using it a number of years later, you still have the same liver that processes that way. So you usually go back to where you were when you stopped at some point, or else worse, because you're older and you might have had liver damage or something going on in the meantime. Does this make sense to you? Do you have any questions before I finish? Because I have like one little exercise to do. Yeah?
So I have, I don't care if I share this. So my second husband's father was an alcoholic.
Mm-hmm.
He stopped drinking.
Mm-hmm.
And then one day he decided to drink again.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the death of him.
Yeah.
So it was because
the aging liver, more compromised. Yeah. Yeah. Now, mind you, there are a lot of people who are labeled alcoholic who may just be people who misuse. I'm talking about a physiological experience. If there are people who use, I ask how many of you used. I ask how many of you had a buzz. I didn't ask, for your privacy's sake, how many of you are in recovery, because people don't often want to disclose that. For those of you who are in the room in recovery, can I give you a hand right now, because it's hard work. And you're a huge value to the field, because you can share that experience, strength, and hope with others. Now, people who use, people who misuse are not necessarily addicted. When the liver gets involved and there's physiological components, we're talking about addiction. The reason people keep using in spite of negative consequences is really because of withdrawal symptoms, though. And by the way, I want you to say, when I'm talking about domestic, well, look at your hands first, fast. Does anyone have on there beef or battered? No, so or for batterer? No B? You didn't get born with a B for batterer or battering victim? No. What about the other hand? Did you look? Is there A for alcoholic addict? I mean, do you come with a set of instructions that tell? No. You don't know what you get till you got it, right? How many of you have been out on a date? Ever? Yeah.
ever.
Yeah. If the first time you went out on a date, I hit you over the head with a frying pan, I'm not going to do it to you, Jack. Set fire to your house, burned up your clothes, hit you with, shot you with a shotgun and called you a bunch of bad names. Would you go out with me a second time? I don't think so. And I can assure you, if the first time you had a drink, you lost all your friends, totaled your car, lost your job, burned down your house, developed esophageal varices, and nearly bled to death, got heart failure and brain damage, and lost your memory, you probably wouldn't drink either. It doesn't happen that way. It starts out nice, and then over time more is revealed. Does this make sense? It's like an ugly relationship. The relationship with alcohol serves a purpose, it's very good, or other drugs, it's very good. And then it bites you in the ass. Sorry. Oop. That's what happens. Okay, so continued use, we'll talk about that withdrawal maybe another time. Because what I want to do is tell you this. So in effect, what you have in domestic violence is a bad lover. And what you have in alcohol and drug addiction is a bad liver. Okay, you got it? And it's not your fault. But now, I'm going to leave you alone, Jack. You're safe. Give him a hand for putting up with me, will you? Okay. Now I'm going to bother Perry.
Uh-oh.
Because, Perry, he said he was going to sit by the door, and that made me mad. Because he was going to try to sneak out on me. And let's just pretend that he did get out the door. And when he shot out the door, no good deed goes unrewarded. Because Perry went out and he took Gwen with him. And I was very mad. But a bee took care of it, because a bee stung Perry. Ow. And a bee stung Gwen. Now Gwen was upset. Now you heard him say ow. The next thing happened is Perry stopped breathing. Stop breathing, will you? Okay. And then he passed out. Can you pass out for me? Yeah, just lay out flat. Lay out. Look there. Yeah, okay. Now, Gwen is looking at him. First thing Gwen is thinking, I don't do that when I get stung. What the hell's wrong with Perry? Then she sees Perry leaning on you. So you know what she says when she sees him not breathing, passed out, and leaning on her? She goes, Perry, you slut and you whore. And there's our kid over there. You're not a good mother. Well, a good father, I guess. You're not doing your job. Now, do you think that's likely that she's going to label him and call him names and look at him and say that and say, God, I wonder why he's operating like that. I got stung and that didn't happen for me. What do you think? What do you think, Gwen? Are you going to call him a slut and a whore? And a bad parent?
After you bring back to life. Maybe.
Maybe? All right, you're getting a bad mark now. What do you think a person would do if they saw someone pass out after getting stung by a bee?
911.
They would call 911, that's right. So 911, zoom, zoom, 911 shows up. And what do they do when they see Perry passed out not breathing and Gwen telling him he's had a bee sting? EpiPen. Now, why would they do that? Why would they give him an EpiPen? You think he might be allergic to bees? Okay, let's just say they take you down there and they do tell you you're allergic to bees and they tell you you will need an EpiPen, et cetera, et cetera. Now, how many of you think that Perry is going to say, well, it was just one damn bee, one episode? How many of you think he's going to say that? How many of you think Perry's going to say, well, let me ask you this. How many bees is Perry allergic to? All of them? You think so? For how long?
Never.
What, are you serious? I mean, Perry told me he went 90 days. 90 days without getting stung. Don't you think now he's fine? What do you think? You don't think? What happens if Perry gets stung again? What happens with each subsequent sting? It takes him where? Closer and closer to what? Death. That's right, it sure does. But you know what? I do believe, I swear, I believe if Perry had a better character when he was stung, he would just breathe. What do you think? Does that make sense?
No.
It doesn't. Well, aren't you in denial? Now, let me ask you the next question. You know what? What if he had what if he went to church more often and prayed harder about it? Don't you think he could just overcome this? Oh, come on. Are you serious? Don't you think he has a significant character flaw? He's allergic to?
Bees.
For how long?
Ever.
Okay, now I want to ask you. Suppose he carries an EpiPen. He doesn't wear cologne. He stays away from bright colors. And he puts netting up over his bed. Can he still die from a bee sting?
Yes.
You think he could?
Yes.
You don't think it would be his fault? Because this is the stalking bee. What if that bee gets through the netting?
And I'm dead.
You're dead, right. Stalker. Just like a batterer is a stalker, you could do everything right and still get killed. You can do everything right. What if Perry had to have surgery, had significant health problems, and had to be exposed to some other type of drug? Because when you're allergic, when you have addiction to one substance, you are automatically addicted. Like with alcohol, it's a sedative hypnotic drug, which means just by virtue of being allergic to having an alcohol allergy, you are allergic to Valium, Xanax, Klonopin, the whole string of those things puts you at risk. Okay? But if he has surgery, or what if happens to him what happened to me on Alaska Airlines? I had asked for a V8 drink, a V8, and was given a double shot of vodka in it. And they said, we hope you like this. After we put 2 shots in because you're an MVP Gold. I said, I'm going to be MVP Dad if I were an alcoholic. Yeah. Thank you very much. Because if that were the case, it could put you at great risk. You see where I'm going with this? So now I want to talk to you. Because Perry is allergic to bees. You saw what happens when he gets stung. It would be very bad if a kid saw that. And I think it's a liability risk. And I think that Perry, because he's allergic to bees, should be banned from our shelter programs. What do you think?
They're thinking, wait. No, let him in.
Now you're looking at me, right?
Yeah.
Does that make any sense? No. What would make sense? What would you do for Perry if he had a bee allergy and you had a beehive in your backyard and were honey-making shelter? Would you say we can't serve him? Is it high risk? Yeah. I mean, is Perry even going to say, I want to be a beekeeper? No. What you're going to do is you're going to try to create a safety plan to help him stay safe and heal and recover and manage. And we'll do the best we can, but we can't guarantee that he's going to be 100% safe. And with people with addiction issues, you do the best you can. You can't guarantee that they're going to be 100% safe, but you do the best they can, because it is a physiological illness. It is not a character flaw. If you know, for battered women, I mean, we did not want a label. Battered women do not want to be pathologized. They don't want the label that by virtue of being battered, there's something wrong with them. But battered women come in with psychiatric disabilities, as do women who are not battered, correct? Alcoholic women and addicted women, they did not find the label of addiction as oppressive as the label of slut, whore, bad mother, all those ugly things, and I apologize for saying, because they're so ugly. Let's just say cancel, cancel, and rewind. But that label is so horrible. Having a diagnosis was actually a gift. Does this make sense? And if you talk to children and parents about alcohol and drugs in the context of the liver and equate it with a bee sting, it takes away stigma, pain, grief, everything. You can understand and accept and help people bridge that gap from use to misuse. If you don't look at that person like they have a major character flaw, you look at that person as someone who's experiencing tremendous harm. And let me tell you something. Cultures that don't have a history of misusing alcohol are more likely to experience alcohol because there's no defense against it. There was no history. It's about physiology. I'm from Ireland. Alcohol was not introduced into our culture until about 1,000 years ago. In the rest of Europe, 5, 6, 10,000. You see higher rates in Ireland because we didn't have it until contact with people that came across the water. And when they came across, how did they subjugate us? They gave us booze, and it was lethal. It could kill us. It wiped out Irish people. And I just want to say, for me, not drinking and using is not just a physiological safeguard. For me, it's also a political statement, because I equate it with a tool of oppression in my culture and my community. So I share that with you. And it helps people when they make those steps to be aligned with others who have raised themselves from this harmful illness, okay?